Welcome back to the Stewards Enquiry on the Winners Enclosure. As we continue to get closer to the Cheltenham Festival, we'll be reflecting back on a super weekend of racing, and we'll also be looking ahead to some of the championship races. Before you do that, let's make sure that you are fully in tune with us and you subscribe to the Winners Enclosure on YouTube so you can get all of our best bets. I'm delighted to be joined by Martin Dixon. And Martin, we've got so much to talk about after such a good weekend.
It was, yeah. There was a shake-up in all sorts of anti-post markets, wasn't there, for the big races at Cheltenham, and we had some big flat racing as well over on the continent. So it was, it was a fabulous weekend of racing, and good to have it all back and in full flow again after a frustrating 3 or 4 weeks.
Well, we'll start with some flat racing before we get fully immersed into jump racing. And we'll obviously start with the Saudi Cup, which again has been a hugely successful meeting. And it was a pretty successful one for the home team here. But MISHRA winning it for John Gosden was a monumental moment for 21-year-old jockey David Egan.
Yeah, it was. It was a massive moment for him, wasn't it? And he's a lad that's always sort of had his eyes on the big time. I think I remember a couple of seasons ago when he was an apprentice rider, he quickly sort of took himself away from the apprentice title and said he was turning professional officially, because it was all about big rides, big meetings and big race winners. And he's had to bide his time. Obviously, he's quietly gone about his business, getting plenty of opportunities for Roger Varian, but huge moment for him. And it's the sort of win that does catapult you onto the radar, I guess, for some of those big meetings, and puts you in the picture as a big race jockey to get more and more opportunities. So it was good. He's got a retainer with Prince Faisal, the owner of MISHRA, so he's obviously done him a good turn in the world's most valuable race, and also exciting for John Gosden to have a horse as effective on the dirt as MISHRA is. It's not often we get that with the Europeans, but we've got it with MISHRA, and he's sort of heading the market for the Dubai World Cup now.
Yeah, he was second in the Saudi Derby. I was out there last year, and probably things just didn't quite pan out for him, but everything went well. He overcame a wide draw. And as you say, he looks very exciting. It hasn't taken John Gosden very long to land the world's richest race in just its second year.
No, you can't keep him down for long. I think he's probably a horse that's taken even connections a little bit by surprise with the progress that he's made. I think it's fair to say there was points last season where there were better fancied stablemates in certain races. I remember on the REILEY Mile at Newmarket one day, MISHRA was second or third in the market behind a very well fancied Gosden horse, but he went and did the business, and he has just kept improving. He's got a great attitude, hasn't he, the horse? He seems to just dig really deep when the jockey asks him, and he answered every call of David's on Saturday.
He certainly did. There was a winner for Saeed and Patsy Cosgrove on a big price horse at 40-1. William Buick rode a double, one for Charlie Appleby and one for a Japanese trainer. And Holly Doyle, she continues her worldwide dominance, doesn't she? Becoming the first female jockey to team up with Willie Mullins, which she hasn't done before, on True Self.
Yeah, we'll be talking plenty about Willie Mullins over the next 3 or 4 weeks with Cheltenham in mind, but he got on the scorecard in Saudi Arabia as well. True Self, the mare who started off in bumpers, actually, and she went and landed a big race over 10 furlongs at the weekend.
As you say, Willie Mullins will no doubt crop up plenty in the course of the next half an hour or so, but he won't do initially, because we're going to start off looking at yesterday's, reflecting on the game spirit yesterday, and all eyes were on Champ because we haven't seen him for quite some time. His credentials were on the line for the Gold Cup, and you'd have to say it was a very, very pleasing performance.
It was. I was a little bit surprised. I was at Newbury yesterday, and I was expecting that because it was his first start back and they were dropping him right in trip, and he's a horse still, relatively inexperienced as a chaser, having not had many goes so far this year because he had the issues and had to have a wind operation back in the autumn. He was still light on experience. I thought they might drop him out and just let him take his time to get into the race and get his jumping in order through the first half of the race and then ride him to finish. But it was quite the opposite. Nico was on him for the first time over fences. He was out, jumped straight into the first fence positively. And I thought early on in the race, he had a couple of sticky moments, maybe getting in tight and still looking a little bit novice-y, but his jumping got much better as the race went on. He then was a little bit awkward at the final fence. I think Sir Royal was coming to get him at that point anyway, but it was a high-class 2-mile performance about a horse that we know is a genuine stayer. He's only had 2 starts in his life over 3 miles, one as a novice hurdler when he won at Aintree in Grade 1 company, and then last year's RSA when we all remember he came storming up the hill to peg them back in the shadows of the posts. So stamina shouldn't be a problem for him in a Gold Cup, and quite rightly I think, Emma, that he's halved in price and starts towards the head of the market now, just with Album Photo ahead of him in the Cheltenham Gold Cup market.
It's a pretty potent combination when you've got a horse that stays and that has just showed the speed that he has.
And I think it is a really open division as well, isn't it? Yeah, Album Photo has won the race twice, but it was a race of fine margins last year. If Paul Townend hadn't given Album Photo such a fantastic ride 12 months ago, I'm not sure he would have won the race. We saw Santini thundering at him late last year, and in another 50 yards he'd probably have pegged him back. And you know, it was a busy finish, wasn't it, 12 months ago? I think it is a very open division, so that door is open for an improver like Champ to come and, you know, maybe improve 5 or 6 pounds and take the honours. So he's got to be a big player. You do sort of still worry a little bit about how inexperienced he is, the fact that the Gold Cup's only a few weeks away, having had a delayed preparation. It's still not ideal, but they couldn't have hoped for any better from him yesterday.
Okay, a quick word on the winner, So Royal, because he definitely won't be lining up at the Gold Cup. He could be going for the Champion Chase, providing that the ground is decent. He kind of deserved that. He was second in the race last year and he was pretty good, but he was slightly in receipt of weight, wasn't he?
He was. I mean, the conditions of the race were perfect for Sir Royal. He's ideally suited, I think, by a flat track ground that's not that testing. Essentially conditions that put an emphasis on his speed, because he's got a lot of that. And he went through the race pretty much on the bridle all the way to the final fence. And he's a horse that Daryl Jacob absolutely loves him, doesn't he? And quite rightly, having won loads of big races, not quite the biggest races, but he's had a lot of big days on Sir Royal, and he's just a really genuine, honest, consistent horse. Hurdles, fences, they all seem to come alike to him. And it was good to see him bounce back from that fall and have a day in the sun, having regularly bumped into the likes of Altior over the last couple of seasons and had to settle for second or third best.
Well, Paul Mickles made it a 1-2 in the Denman Chase. He was winning this race for the 10th time. Probably not the likeliest one you'd have thought beforehand, Secret Investor, but he got a pretty good ride from Bryony up front. He
did. He was allowed to boss the race, wasn't he? And he got into a really good rhythm. And when Secret Investor's allowed to do that, he is a dangerous horse. He likes it when gets an easy lead and there's no horses pestering him, and his jumping can be very good. And that was the case yesterday. And he's not an easy horse to get past, as Clan des Obeaux and Harry Cobden found out from the final fence. It looked like he was coming to get him, but he just wouldn't quite go past. Now, Paul Nicholls very quickly came past us yesterday on the track and said, I'll put some cheek pieces on him next time. So I think that's what they're going to be doing. We're going to see some headgear on Clan des Obeaux, probably in the bowl at Aintree, where he'll also come up against Secret Investor again. But you know, Clan des Obeaux, it was still a really good run from him because he was conceding weight to Secret Investor, who, as I say, was allowed to boss the race and got into a really good rhythm. And it was a typical Bryony Frost ride, wasn't it, Emma, with those front running tactics that we've seen on Frodon so many times.
Yeah, she was talking about it. I was reading about it in the Racing Post, actually, and she was saying there's nothing better than that feeling of being out there in front and sort of bossing a race. But that was a career best by this horse, and he's improving, isn't he, the winner?
He is, yeah. He'd won a handicap off a high weight back at Chepstow in the autumn, then disappointed a little bit the last time that we'd seen him, but freshened up, and as you say, another career best from him. So he'll go to Aintree. I would think he'll be an outsider, and perhaps that was his day yesterday because the conditions were so much in his favour. Easy lead, he was in receipt of weight from Clan des Obeaux. So in a Grade 1, that wouldn't be the case. So I'm not sure I would fancy him to follow up necessarily, but he had his day yesterday.
Okay, a quick word reflecting back on the Betfair Ascot chase, because Cyrname was a bitterly disappointing favourite, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was. I mean, it was on the cards that could happen, wasn't it? I tipped up Benny's King, hoping the race would fall apart. The race did fall apart, not in the favour of Benny's King, unfortunately. But Daschle Drasha, fair play to him. He's as honest as you'll get. He goes, positive tactics. His jumping is good. He took it up a fair way from home once Cyrname had cracked, and he just kept going out in front, having looked vulnerable to Master Tommy Tucker at one stage up the straight. So he's really genuine and honest. I suspect he's not absolutely out of the top draw, and he ended up landing on what turned out to be quite a weak grade one, with Cyrname not performing up to his best. But you can't knock Daschle Drasha in the way that he goes about things and really wears his heart on his sleeve.
What next for Cyrname? Because he was pulled up in the King George, he was pulled up again on Saturday, and he stopped quickly. I mean, he stopped to nothing, didn't he?
Yeah, the connection said afterwards that he'd had a respiratory issue. He obviously, there's an excuse there, but you're sort of mounting up the excuses for Cyrname really over the last couple of seasons. He was pretty good in the Charlie Hall, but you look back at that race and it was quite a weak renewal of the Charlie Hall, in truth, and he wasn't actually tested in the way that he's been tested in the King George and then on Saturday in the Ascot chase. And when he's been asked a real question in his races over the last couple of seasons, the fact is he's disappointed on too many occasions now to sort of still be viewing him as that top class horse that he was showing consistently a couple of seasons ago. He had those 3 wins at Ascot back to back, all wide margins, all really impressive. That was him at his best, Emma. I just don't think he's the same horse anymore. It might be physical issues with him. It might be in his head. I'm not sure. It might be a combination of all of that. But I just don't think he's the same horse. And I doubt very much that we'll see those type of performances from Cyrname again that we saw a couple of seasons ago.
Okay, we saw Tiger Roll back on a racecourse yesterday in Ireland. So he was tailed off in a hurdles race that he's won before, and he was beaten, I think, 12 lengths in it last year. What did you make of that?
I was disappointed. I wasn't surprised. But again, I think it's along the same lines as Cyrname for me. If Gordon gets him to bounce back to his best, fair play, because it'll be some effort. But from what I've seen of him over the last 12 months, I'm just not quite sure that he's quite the same horse that he was 2 years ago. Even in the cross country last year, when he was left behind by Easy's Land, he just didn't quite finish off his race in the way that we're used to seeing Tiger Roll finish off his races. And since then, he's obviously been disappointing in the autumn on the cross-country track, and again yesterday just not finding very much. Now, you can put that down to fitness and the ground if you want to be forgiving, but I thought he wilted very, very quickly, and just a bit too quickly for me to be in any way positive about his chance going into firstly the cross-country and also the Grand National, which I think will be obviously he's got a higher weight to carry, so he's going to have to be even better than he was 2 years ago to win a third Grand National. I just can't see it.
Connection said afterwards that he travelled well to the third last. He then got tired and he hated the ground. He's out to 25-1 for the Grand National, and his next plan is the cross-country race at Cheltenham. One horse I was really impressed with yesterday was John Joe O'Neill's Sawin Glory in the Betfair Hurdle. He travelled like a pretty smart horse, didn't he, in a good race?
He did, and he'd looked good in his bumpers last season, and then he turned over Brave Man's Game, Paul Nicholls' Grade 1 novice winner at Chepstow back in the autumn, and since then it just hadn't quite happened for him, but he was right back on point in the Betfair Hurdle, and as you say, he really tanked his way through the race, got to the front on the bridle, put the race to bed very quickly. It was a really good performance. Now, it was from a handicap mark in the low 130s, so we've got to be realistic and think he's still going to have to improve again to win or even be placed in a Supreme Novices, I would say. But he's back on point, he's going the right way, and it was a smooth success in a race that was run at a strong pace, and it's a good platform, I guess, going into a race like the Supreme Novices, having contested a very competitive race and won it like the Betfair Hurdle yesterday.
And you think the Supreme's quite open, don't you? I know the betting maybe suggests it's maybe not, but it's not all about that top horse of Willie Mullins's.
No, appreciate it's obviously a really talented horse, but he's probably not a natural out and out 2 mile horse, I wouldn't say. I don't think he'll spend all his life running over 2 miles. I think we'll see him over further in time. And I think that the door is open for an improver to come and shake him up at the very least. And yet he's very dominant in the market. So yeah, I wouldn't put anybody off Sawin Glory. I think it very much is the plan for him to go there. He's got the entry. John Joe seemed pretty sure that that's what he wanted to do if he could convince the owners to go down that route. So we'll wait and see. But I expect Sawin Glory to turn up in the Supreme Field like so many Betfair hurdle winners in the past have.
Well, the championship race that we're going to focus on this week is the Champion Hurdle. And the picture of that slightly changed after Goshen powered to victory at the weekend. But looking at them, Epatante and Honeysuckle are the two that are dominating the market, and it's quite an intriguing race, isn't it now?
Yeah, I think it's been brilliant the way that it's developed over the course of the season, because this year's Champion Hurdle had the potential to just fall flat on its face. I think we had Epatante disappoint a little bit getting turned over Christmas. Obviously, she's still got to bounce back from that. But you were left wondering, if Honeysuckle hadn't have done what she did in Ireland and she'd have ended up in distance, if Goshen hadn't have bounced back to form like he did at the weekend, we could have all been left a little bit feeling quite deflated about the Champion Hurdle this year, as if it wasn't going to be much of a race. But with Honeysuckle doing what she did at the Dublin Racing Festival, and then Goshen bouncing back with a bit of the wow factor again on Saturday, it really has opened it up to one of the races of the meeting potentially at Cheltenham.
Well, let's start at the top with Epatante, and we'll just go through the top three in the market. How forgiving are you of what happened at Kempton?
Yeah, I think we can forgive that. And she's had plenty of time to recover since then and get freshen up and get back on track. And given the consistency with which she performed over the previous 18 months, really, ever since that disappointment at the festival the year before, but all the way through last season, and then in the Fighting Fifth, she'd been very, very good indeed. And she's a mare with loads of ability, loads of speed, and very few negatives, I think, going into the Cheltenham Festival this year. If she reproduces her form from last year's festival, I'd still probably make her the horse to beat. But Goshen is a bigger price than the hare, isn't he? And he did very much look back to his very best on Saturday, just the way that he very quickly opened the race up and had it won down the back straight at Wincanton on Saturday. That was really impressive and great to see him back, because he had been very disappointing both on the flat and over hurdles back in the autumn.
It's amazing that they've got him back, as you say, because after what happened in the Triumph last year, he just was a shadow of his former self.
He was, yeah, and he's a massive horse for the yard, isn't he? I know Jamie absolutely loves him to bits, understandably, and he'll be keener than anybody, obviously, to put the record straight after what happened in the Triumph Hurdle last year. There'd be some buzz if they could go there and manage to get the job done in the Champion Hurdle this season. And I do think he's a massive player. As I say, I think Epatante, yeah, I very much respect her. I think if she is back to her very best, then she's going to be bang there again. But Goshen can gallop in a way that you see very few horses being able to gallop. He puts races to bed, puts the opposition into a difficult place in a race very, very quickly. And it was just great to see that back from him again on Saturday. You could call him the winner pretty much 3 out, which is a long way from home at Wincanton. And then we saw him with that relentless, exaggerated stride that he's got, just keep on bounding clear up the straight. So very, very impressive on Saturday from Goshen.
Honeysuckle is who I like for this race. She's just phenomenal. She never ceases to amaze. And she's 10 from 10. And she was just so good, wasn't she, in the Irish Champion last time? And she showed so much speed that day.
Yeah, that surprised me, to be honest. And as I say, it is a wide open race. So I'll be tipping Goshen, but without any sort of real conviction behind it, if that makes sense. I'm sure as we discuss these more and more races over the next few weeks, there'll be stronger opinions. But you can genuinely see any of those first three. They've all got real positives behind them, haven't they? And as you say, Honeysuckle, 10 from 10. It's pretty much impossible to knock her, isn't it? The way that she's gone about things. Season particularly.
Yes, it all makes for an intriguing race. Goshen for Martin and Honeysuckle for me. Well, Martin, That is our wrap on today. That summarises what's happened at the weekend, brings all those horses into the picture and where they're at in regards to the Cheltenham Festival. And we'll be talking to you again soon. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Emma.